the business of, we run 7 businesses at once. That's completely unhinged, right? That's an insane thing to do, right? Because it's not easy.
You and the team all recovered since the Euros final then?
I was away.
Were you?
I was away, yeah. I was in Greece. It was quite depressing.
Yeah, yeah. We watched
sort of
it.
a
We
bit
were
of a
in
damp
Croatia
squib.
as well, to be fair.
Yeah.
And yeah, towards the end of the game, just slowly started edging more and more towards the back of the crowd,
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
could just make a quick exit.
You're just like,
Welcome back to D2C Diaries with me, Loukas.
Me, Olly.
And we're really excited today because we have Laurence Booth-Clibborn joining us, who is the MD and co-founder of The Mothership, which is a consumer brand house with, how many brands is it now? Is it
we're
7?
now at 7, yeah.
7, that's crazy. Really excited to have you on. You know, we have the pleasure of actually being able to work very closely with you and some of your brands. So excited to dive into some of that and some other topics. But I guess just it would be great to start with just that kind of laying the foundations, context, origin story of you and the business up until this point.
Yeah, man. It's great to be here. Always happy to come on and chat and talk all things D2C and ecom. I guess my origin story is a big word.
Bruce Wayne.
I guess starting with me, I've come to ecom through quite a circuitous route. I started my career. I mean, really, I left uni with no understanding of what I wanted to do. I think like lots of people, I knew I was kind of a creative person. I loved ideas, but for a long time that didn't really materialize into anything. And I got a job, sort of by happenstance, at a marketing company, and I thought that would be a great way to kind of express a bit of that creativity and learn a little bit about digital marketing. It was back in the day where Meta ads just printed money and it was really easy and it was kind of great. And I spent like 2.5 years doing kind of affiliate and lead gen ads, which was a really, really good basis for understanding kind of where I wanted to go. And it was a big, fast growth time. Business was going really great, and it allowed me to grow a lot and realize over time that this understanding of how do all these marketing channels work was something that I kind of found really interesting. And so I went into startups because that was a place where I could get even more hands-on with different channels and work across not only digital but also offline sales, account management, or customer service even sometimes. And so I ended up in tech. Startups, tech, obviously. I wanted to be kind of a cool tech bro. And I was head of growth at a couple of tech kind of startups. One, a kind of conventional B2C running app. And then I helped a big B2B finance fintech called Iwaka start their kind of buy now, pay later product. So it was a kind of they have a buy now, pay later product for businesses that I was sort of part of the founding team of.
They do invoice buy now, pay later, don't they? For
Yeah.
someone's referred them to us actually for clients.
Iwaka
to use.
Pay, yeah. So I was the first. There was a kind of internal team, and I was the first external person to come in and kind of ran the growth from like nothing to like 1,000 customers. And it took us 18 months, grew the product from nothing, and it was a pretty cool journey. And then the only thing that I knew I always wanted to do was start a business. I have the unfortunate privilege of having 4 brothers, all of whom are entrepreneurs.
No
and
way.
my dad has started multiple businesses, and my mum's dad also started businesses.
In the blood.
It's in the blood.
You never see that where, you usually get polar opposites where you get kind of the creative entrepreneur and then, the banker or...
Yeah. Well, I have the opposite, which is that like I was probably the most unsuited to entrepreneurship. I was the most anxious. I was the most like all up in the air, but I also felt very much that like I really wanted to prove myself and be the kind of person, I grew up around it, and that sense of freedom was something that I really saw in a lot of my family. And so when the opportunity came to start a business, even though it was in ecom and I'd never done it before, I was like, digital marketing, how hard can it be? Turns out like not easy.
Ignorance is bliss.
Ecom is not easy. And so I kind of jumped at the chance. And so in March 2021, a group of us came together, sort of brought together by the guy who had started that lead gen business I'd worked for at the beginning, called MBF Global. There's a guy called Titus Sharp. He kind of got us all together and said, hey, this e-com aggregator thing is starting to happen in the US. Loads of people are buying Amazon brands. We should get on this. This is a really interesting opportunity. And his thesis was actually that, and I think this has actually proved true in terms of how we think about the market and how we run the business. There's a lot of people who are starting these e-com aggregators who were very finance driven. They were very like, the model is the model, and I guess came from consulting and finance background. And we were much more entrepreneurs, marketers, with kind of a deep empathy for what it's really like to start a business and run a business. And we felt that we had an opportunity not only to speak to entrepreneurs in a more empathetic way that would help us win deals, but also run the businesses in a way that wasn't just about gutting for parts and that stuff, and actually really kind of trying to honor and elevate the brands that we bought. And so it was a pretty cool mission, pretty cool time. And from March 21 to February 2022, we sort of set about trying to run one and then two Amazon businesses. So very luckily we kind of put some money together, bought a really tiny Amazon business, and we literally just was like, right, let's just see what happens.
What was that business?
It's a business, an outdoor accessories business.
Okay.
It sells like bungee cords. We still have it, but it's quite a small part of our portfolio now. But it sells like bungee cords and boot pullers and welly boot bags on Amazon. It's very
commodity, not commodity, utility-driven product.
Very utility-driven product, very commoditized market. Competing with like a lot of direct Chinese sellers, and it was a kind of a real brutal lesson in Amazon, but it never really had this D2C potential. And quite early on, we realized that the problem with the Amazon market is you're obviously really, really exposed to one platform. It's very hard to get your brand story across. It's very hard to differentiate if you're in a very utility commoditized area. And it's therefore you're under constant price pressure, and you aren't really building long-term value. So we were like, right, okay, well, we want to try and crack this D2C thing. And because a lot of us had come from a background of digital ads, Meta, Google, I'd done a bit of brand building. Like this is that kind of area was something that we really, really felt was an opportunity. And so, early on, we really had a stated aim of being multi-channel that we've kind of pulled through for the next kind of 3.5 years. And so we bought a pet supplement brand that was our first foray into it. And then when we finally raised kind of a round of money, so we raised about £16 million in February of 2022. That's when we set about buying D2C businesses, buying multi-channel businesses, growing our Amazon capability, growing our D2C capability, and really leaning into businesses that we felt we could really build long-term value in. Yeah.
Interesting.
I could go on.
What out of interest, you kind of skimmed over the raising raising funding. What was your approach there? What were some of the biggest maybe lessons you learned from doing that for the first time?
You've only done one round, right? Yeah.
We've only done one round. Yeah. So I think, I mean, look, there are loads of lessons. I think we were in a market. We got really lucky because we were still just at the back end of, I would say, the sort of slightly bull market. Before everything turned, I mean, we literally closed the round in January. We announced it in February. We just closed around in January, and I think that was like 6 weeks before the Ukraine war started, and everything sort of started to really drop off. And so we just got super lucky. I think one of the big lessons for me has been learning the difference, and this is, I feel massively privileged to have worked with a couple of awesome entrepreneurs, who, Titus being one of them, and Ben, who is our CEO. They both have started businesses. They really taught me the difference between good money and bad money. I think across the board in kind of small business culture, whether it's startups in tech or e-com, there's a lot of conversation about the value of when and how to take VC money. Yeah. And we were very much of the opinion from an early point that we we'd only take VC money if we felt that the terms were right. We wanted to avoid liquidity preferences at all points. We wanted to avoid people who would be overly, I guess, prescriptive of who we wanted to be. And to give you an illustration, we had some offers and conversations with debt providers who were saying, oh, well, you have to buy businesses that are X% Amazon from an early stage, and we were saying, well, we don't really know where the market is going. How do you know that that's right? But that's because everyone else was doing it and they were trying to protect their downside. And so you can be really constrained by a lot of this stuff. So.
Yeah, of course. I've spoken to quite a few people who are trying to raise in D2C specifically, and it's that I feel like they sometimes get a bit deer in headlights around like, I need this money or I want this money, but don't consider like it's like a saying that the only irreversible thing in business is your cap table. It's the only thing. Once you've changed it, is incredibly hard to restructure and change. And I feel like when you raise money from the wrong people, you move the goal. You divulging control, divulging decision making to other people, moving the goalposts. Which a lot of D2C, it's interesting because so many people in the industry start the brand for freedom and autonomy to get away from a job, and then end up raising money and lose that freedom and autonomy and have to answer to goals that are sometimes really hard to meet.
I totally agree with that. I think that that's the second part of that lesson of like knowing the difference between good money and bad money was also understanding that we raised far less than a lot of our, I guess, competitors or other people in the market. We were seeing rounds of 70, 80, 100 million. There obviously is a moment where you're like, why are we not doing that? But then you realise that because the kind of money we raised less, but from better people who are going to allow us to experiment and would allow us as shareholders to maintain more control and also more upside, right? Like at the end of the day, like you want to make sure that you and then also your employees are going to be able to get the kind of liquidity that can change their lives. And you want to try and think a little bit further ahead than just right now I want to be the person with the biggest PR headline, right? So I think there's a little bit of that I feel I've learned, and a massive lesson for me has been like it's better to just have enough.
There's some horror stories as well. Thrasio is the big horror story. £1 billion valuation to selling off the brands to the people who they bought them from originally.
Crazy.
Thrasio is a classic example. I mean, the other problem. I mean, this is not to get too in the weeds, but I think the other problem is that our business model started very much in a 0% interest rate environment, and when you can take literally $1 billion of debt and buy businesses basically for free. That sounds great until base rates go up and you have just like literally like $300 million a month to pay back it's just impossible.
There's a great book called Shortcut My Startup, and it kind of goes deep into the idea of like the difference between a sailboat versus a speedboat, and like if you are raising that capital, just how much harder it is to be a sailboat, which when you're a sailboat, you're almost thinking about that much longer term growth horizon, whereas you almost have to become a speedboat to be hitting those short term numbers and KPIs.
Yeah, but I think it takes a lot of character, and this is not supposed to be a compliment to us. I think this was more because of the experience, but I think it takes a lot of character, especially as a young person, to believe that and to think that long term. Because firstly, you're all over Twitter and everyone's telling you they got really rich in 2 days. And also, there's this sense of everything having to happen now. And I definitely felt that often, like this need of like, I've got to be really successful right now. And it's always convenient to say, oh, well, that means I have to take the money. But you don't really think about what your life might look like in 3 years or 5 years. And I think having someone around you to tell you that, if you go and take the VC money, you will have an amazing journey, but you need to understand what that means.
Yeah, exactly. There's no right or wrong. It's just about understanding that.
I think you can drill that analogy down into marketing. I think there's an element of like, especially in D2C, that short-term, long-term time horizon, especially over the last couple of years, like people like really focusing down on like investments in channels, investments in strategy that only drive very short-term impact, direct response impact, but then you need to layer like brand activation, traditional marketing, which pays back over a longer time, but then can have like that 2-3 year
Yeah.
puts you in a position to really grow for a long term.
Yeah.
In a different way.
I mean, I totally. It's that lesbian. You know who's the other person? The big advertising strategist that show like direct response. It's
The Valley of Death, like
you just need to be building brand activation over time.
Yeah.
But otherwise, direct response gives you massive spikes, but you never really get beyond the level.
get into a Valley of Death where you get that CAC efficiency that comes down, and then you lose that top of funnel brand, and it starts to rise, and then you go out of business.
I guess the thing with that though is like, what does brand building really look like, and how do you do that in a smart way? I think from my perspective, while I totally agree with you, I've often
Halo.
Yeah, like what is that? What do you mean? Like, are you trying to build a community and a relationship with your customers? Do you have to do that through, I don't know, for want of better words, like do you have to do that through spending loads and loads of money and time on all this fancy stuff, or can it be something much more cheap and authentic? Like,
I think today I think it can. You've got the tools and vehicles to be able to do that through, the power of reach with short form video, through, educating and building those private communities where you can layer in elements of education that almost create this lifestyle around a brand or product. But this takes us on to a really interesting post you wrote on LinkedIn, I think around a month ago. I'm just going to read some of it out. Don't equate looking successful with being successful. When the Mothership raised, we made all the mistakes in the book. We had loads of people super fast. We invested in thousands of fancy systems. We spent lots of time trying to add processes to deal with scale before we'd got there. So I think, again, this is something that we've spoken about before on the podcast, and is kind of that danger in raising capital and how this could potentially affect and influence the decisions that you make in business. It'd be great to dive a little bit deeper into this, and I guess what you've done to combat this.
It would be good to I know we had a discussion when we last met around how you've sort of changed some of that approach over the last sort of 12 months, and then before we started you mentioned the offsite in Barcelona, presenting that.
I think so. There's a lot here. Lots
to unpack.
All day.
And I talk a lot, so you got to stop me at some point. But I think that the first thing is that, speaking, I guess personally, when we raised money, there was a part of me that was like, we've made it. This is the best thing ever. I've got, my pictures on it. Yeah. And I felt that I wanted to have that feeling of, everyone walking around in hoodies and got merch and everyone looks really cool, and I could post on LinkedIn loads and get loads of likes, and it would be awesome. And obviously at this point we were going to be, on the beach before we knew it. I could already feel the pina colada in my hand, and I think that the reality of what it is to build a business is so different from that. And I think we immediately, because we had all this money, a lot of bootstrappers on LinkedIn will say this classic thing of lack of resource breeds ingenuity and innovation and great business. And when you have lots of money, it's really easy to make, I guess, expensive decisions. And I think every decision we made, we had a good logic for it. But realistically, we did a couple of things that I wouldn't have done, or I wouldn't do again. So the first thing is we hired a lot. And that's because we had loads of areas of the business that we felt like we just didn't really know how to do it, and we felt like it was a big opportunity and we had the money, so you might as well hire someone to do it. Now the problem was that we didn't really understand what we were looking for. So we literally were, we were hiring people without real understanding of what they were going to do and why, and how we were going to measure what they were going to do. We were also hiring people in areas that we didn't feel ourselves confident that we could manage. So that leads you into this kind of a bit of a challenge, because you're like, I really want to trust you to do this thing, but I don't really know how to work out whether you're doing it well. And if it doesn't feel quite right for me, is that my fault? Is that their fault? I don't know. Yeah. And it became really hard to manage. And when you're growing that fast, we went from basically 12 people to 45, 50 people in 4.5 months.
Wow, that's crazy.
And you just end up in this position where suddenly you have to manage loads of stuff and loads of systems and loads of process. Yeah.
And they say, don't they, that your systems and processes break every 15?
Seven people.
Oh, is it 7 people?
15 people.
Yeah, or just break it all at once.
I think it just adds just so much complexity.
Yeah.
I spend so much time telling people to focus. I've spent like so much time, and there's like an epidemic of people thinking they need to do so many different things when in reality they still just most of the time need to do one or two way better than they are now.
It's
to
not
unlock
just
that
about
next stage of
experience.
growth.
It's not just about that experience within a role and a skill set. It's like experience within that particular business. Because we've
Yeah.
had the same sometimes where you get bottom heavy with, although people that are really experienced from an industry perspective,
Yeah.
but actually, you know, you got 60% of the 70% of the company that have only been there for 3 months.
Totally. And I think that that like so many lessons have come out of this, right? The one of the big lessons absolutely is focus, and I will come on to that because that is really how we've changed the business and really developed it over time. Then the other thing is really acknowledging that there is no right way to do this. I think one of the hardest things for me as someone who is like convinced always there's a right answer, and I think this is like maybe an education thing. Like you grew up in school and there's a textbook and there's someone at the front of the class who knows the right answer, and you've got to find the right answer. And you get out into life and you're trying to start a business and you realise that there is a million different ways to do this.
There's a lot of paths to take.
There's so many
Some
paths.
are more well trodden than others.
Yeah, I met a
and
guy.
it's
I met a
just
guy
like-
the other day who was doing QVC still,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a D2C brand doing QVC, and you're like, oh my goodness, I would never think of that, and I would not do that. But you know, there are hundreds and hundreds of different ways to scale a business and build a business, and the most important thing is that at the top level you're aligned. And what started to happen is because everything was growing so much and we were trying to do stuff, we weren't really taking the space to take a beat and say, hey guys, at a very senior level, do we know what we're trying to do? Do we know why we're trying to do it? Do we know where we're trying to go? Do we have any clarity over what the path is? Or are we just running around like headless chickens? And then trying to fix, because you just end up in this sort of panic mode of trying to fix everything. And that's where you end up putting loads and loads of processes in place that suddenly mean that your decision making goes from really quick to unbelievably slow and complex, and information gets lost, and then spending a lot of money on software to try and fix that, which then harms your P&L even more, and then you get into a bit of a death spiral. Sorry, Ollie.
On that point of like choosing the initiative to work on, I've spent a lot of time in Jack Group, the ecom group, involved in building like a process around that. And like, especially for senior team members who have a lot of autonomy to make decisions and to like engage in new work streams or engage in new initiatives, it's like, right, there's so much you can do. Like, how do we build a process around appraising where is the next thing, best thing to allocate resource to? So through like an impact, confidence, effort sort of matrix, weighing it up on like a metric based impact.
Yeah.
How confident are we that we can actually do this, and what's the effort and lift required? And I feel like that's quite a pragmatic approach. I think there's still probably a better way to do it, but that's been really impactful for us because it stopped us engaging and wasting resource in places. It's made us focus on like quick, easy wins, not things that require a massive lift to get like small impact.
This speaks from my perspective. It absolutely starts at the senior level, but for my dream is to have an organization and a business. And I said this the other day to the company, but this is what commercial ownership really looks like for me. We run 7 businesses at once. That's completely unhinged, right? That's an insane thing to do, right? Because it's not easy, right? To prioritize this stuff. Like everything is, you've always got stuff to work on. And I can't fix that. I can't do that. My brain will explode and has exploded at various points. And like everyone, so the most important thing is every single person in the business understands what they're trying to work on, why they're trying to work on it, and are making commercial judgments and strategic judgments at every level of the business. Because if you can create an organization where that is happening, you create an organization which you can absolutely drive trust all the way down to the coalface, as it were. Like the person buying the ads should be thinking about not what they've been told to buy ads for, but I've got 3 accounts. This is going really badly. This is going really well. Like, where am I going to focus my effort? Okay, well, we know what the top level strategy is, but I also know where the commercial reality is right now. I'm going to make this decision. Yeah. And it maybe sounds slightly idealistic, but from my perspective, the organization that I want to work in, I would want to work in, is one where full ownership is given, but within the expectation that you're making commercial judgments, and that effort. That is basically what commercial awareness
Yeah.
looked like, because you need to understand the why of the business and what you're doing and what the impact is.
I kind of went through this journey a little bit with my business, obviously not running 7 at once, but but it's true. It's like, you know, spreading yourself too thin, trying to do all of these different things well, when you know, in reality, you're not doing any of them well. And then it's like, how can you firstly just do one thing right and one thing well, whether that be a specific channel, whether that be a specific strategy, you know, what does that look like? And how can you kind of firstly just dial that one thing in correctly before you then, you know, look at the other things, because it's just that shiny medal thing, isn't it?
I totally agree. And I think this is, you know, speaking to kind of how we've developed and changed the business, you know, we made some really, really hard decisions at the end of 2023. We let go of quite a lot of people in September, and that was incredibly hard for everyone in the business to make those decisions. But the direction we've set, firstly, it's kind of been extraordinary how much more clarity has come into the business, how much we've reduced that complexity, but also in terms of the direction we've set and what we've been executing over the last 6-7 months. Focus has been really the big part of what we've been trying to do, and acknowledging we're going to be good at fewer things, but we're going to do them really well. Yeah. But also acknowledging the flip side of that, which is, you know, I get in trouble with my team for saying this because it's kind of quite negative. I often, but it's a phrase that was used a lot in my early career, but like, things are always on fire, right? And as a business owner, or as someone who's working in a startup, you're literally looking around, you know, that meme of like, this is fine, and like everything's on fire.
You are a firefighter.
Yeah. And like, your job is to work out which one you're going to put out first, but that means leaving loads of stuff burning, and like, that's okay. Like, it has to be okay that, for example, we love the first brand we bought, it sells bungee cords, it's great, it, you know, it makes money, but we're not spending time on that. And that might mean that it's going to slightly decline. But the benefit of that is we free up the headspace to work on the other stuff that we think is going to grow bigger and is going to get us strategically to where we want to be. And that cost versus reward, that cost of focus is also important to acknowledge, because you can't walk around saying we got to focus, but also you're not allowed to drop anything, because if you then everyone just feels as stretched. And I think the journey we've gone through is gone from, you know, in September, I mean, we've had a lot of conversations about this, but like in September, I was like, we want to focus, but I don't want to lose anything. And then it was difficult. And now we're getting more and more to the point where, you know, we are openly announcing that we're going to stop working on some of our brands. We're going to reduce the time massively on one of our brands. And we might even look at like liquidating stock and just like getting the headspace off. Like, we're making difficult decisions commercially to allow the team to know exactly what they want to work on, and to not have to work on 15 things at once, but to work on one.
You've obviously gone through that process of through like a time of like difficulty. I don't want to call it struggle, but like from a
call it whatever you want.
But I think it's that can be even more pronounced when everything's going well. Like when a business is growing very fast, there is even more. I've found this, especially for the start of this year, like having to like say no to people trying to do new things, because there's a temptation when everything in your core work streams are going well. It's like, oh, let's try this now, let's do this. Yeah. And and at that point, it's sometimes even more important to continue to just focus on the core driver, the core growth channel. Because it's probably not as optimized as you think it is. There's probably another 30-40% growth there, if not more.
I think that core insight is really important, though. Like, the belief that nothing is as optimized as you think it is, and there's always more growth than you think there is. Like, I remember having a conversation on one of the brands that we've actually worked together on, Nothing Fishy, with someone who used to work for us. When we were really, really struggling on Meta, right? We could not make Meta work. We tried loads of stuff, and this was maybe it was doing like 2 million top line. And someone came to me and said, well, I think we've hit our ceiling on Meta. And I was just like,
I have that conversation maybe 3-4 times a week.
I was like,
that's crazy.
Do you know, like, do you know how, like, we've got like 10,000 people have bought this product. Do you know how many people live in the UK? Like, but let alone other countries. Like, that is insane. Right? Yeah. The problem is not that. The problem is we just have not worked out a way to scale this channel properly. And that I think was one of those real moments of like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And I mean, since we've managed to really like change the game in that business purely through Meta, right? And that has basically been coming back to the basics of what needs to happen. Like, is our creative good enough? Are we really understanding our audience? Do we understand what angles we're going to kind of push them? And then can we buy media in a non-dumb way? And like that, like, but seriously, it's like buying media these days because of AI and all this stuff is not like, it's not as complex as it used to be. It's much more about risk management, I guess. And that, but like, it's been remarkable how it's changed, and it's not been anything other than just simplicity and focusing on what works, and not trying to go, well, Meta's broken, so we're going to try PR and affiliates and all of this stuff, and you're like, oh, well, that's actually going to make everything way worse.
I think, and obviously this, especially now in the world of TikTok Shop affiliates, there are some TikTok products, but I think in many cases, if you can't get Meta working, you've got a product market fit problems in many ways.
It's also like when like most brands, like TikTok Shop is a great product, it's a great growth channel, but if you pull the CAC to LTV ratio on those customers, they will always be worth less than the people you acquire on Meta. So like, even when you appraise it through like a purely financial lens.
Are you doing much TikTok Shop with?
One of our new brands is absolutely, we barely put any attention into it other than gifting.
Yeah.
And we looked on it like last week, and it's going to do about 100 grand this month on TikTok Shop affiliates, just sending
barely
products out to people, barely touching it. I actually hadn't looked in the platform 6 weeks, and our head of organic Will just sent it. It was just like flying, so testimony to his good work. So it is a really good growth channel, but it doesn't mean that you have to do it like right now. And
that affiliates through TikTok as well for supplements is just absolutely booting as well. Just seeing so much potential there.
Yeah, and I think look, I also think sometimes there's a little bit of not really acknowledging of the grey area between everything, right? Like if you can do affiliate well, like, and you're doing affiliate well, or even influencers well on Meta because it's helping you get great content to put on your Meta ads. It's like
wrapping
it's sort of a similar thing. And there's no moment where if someone in my team comes to me and says, I want to do TikTok Shop, here's my plan, right? I'm not going to say absolutely don't. I'm going to say, right, okay, firstly, what's the upside? Like, how do we measure it? And it's coming back to what you said earlier. Like, where does the healthy friction start? And it isn't. Probably there are definitely people who will be like, it's really annoying that I have to write out this doc that says this is what I want to do. This is how much money I think it's going to make. This is how much effort it's going to do. But that will force you into a position where you're like, okay, this is a great opportunity, and then we can time box it.
It's far more annoying to get 3 months into it and make no money.
Precisely.
It's, like,
right?
it's completely different.
Or to just like do it really badly and then have me say, well, we're never doing that again. And I'd much rather have like to do fewer things. Like, we've gone from like really being in obviously it wasn't completely existential, but like the business wasn't performing nearly as well as we should have done to we are like, I think we're well ahead of what we thought we could achieve, right? And we've swung the business in about 7 months. And one of the biggest things we've done is just, it's all been about simplicity. It's all been about that pushing of, we don't have to change everything every 3 months. We don't have to do a new thing every 3 months. We can have really set goals for a year that are about inputs, behaviors, like how we work and like what we want to focus on. And that will actually yield a lot more results.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
I always bring it back to the Tev example. Like, I talk about it a lot, but like we're a 3 channel brand that's going to do like upper 8 figures in revenue in one market. And like, that is like simplicity personified, and like we're now going to need to do more channels, but it's got us this far.
But you bought that privilege, right? And I think we talked a bit earlier. I said we took the team to Barcelona, which sounds incredibly bougie, and it was lovely. But it, it was a bit of a hangover from previous times, but it was really, really great to do. One of the things I said is that over time you go through phases in a business, and when you firstly have to focus on, especially when you're trying to be profitable and you're trying to build a cash flowing business, you have to focus on survival. And when you focus on survival, then you buy yourself the privilege of imagining more. And then when you've achieved that, you buy yourself the privilege of dreaming again. And and that can be the same thing for channels. Like, you have to go one step at a time. It comes back to even the VC point earlier, like how people think about businesses and building businesses, that stuff just takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And building the building blocks, really solidifying one block or two blocks can take a long time, but those blocks can be really significant.
Yeah.
And then it's better to say, all right, well, now we have the cash and we have the time, we're going to focus and we're going to crack TikTok.
Yeah.
Fine.
There's something I use to ground myself in terms of like prioritization quite a lot, just on a personal level as an operator, which is, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's like the what, why, so what model. So it's kind of like, what am I prioritizing? Why am I prioritizing that thing? So what does that mean for the business?
Yeah.
And it's just a great way to almost continue to ground yourself in what really we should be working on right now. Because I'm very ADHD. Like, I'm a bit bouncing off walls,
club.
7 to 10 different tasks in one go.
Yep.
I think all three of us.
I have literally 500 tabs open on my computer.
Now that's psychopathic.
I think so I've tried to do this thing I've tried to do this thing where I try and rewrite my to-do list at least 3 times a week. I'm trying to do it every day, but sometimes like 3 times a week I rewrite it. And the reason why is that I'm fundamentally convinced, and I think this also happens when you start to have lots of people and process and thinking about, obviously the structure of the business is way beyond just like what we were, just like a group of people trying to like crack some channels and see what happens. Now we've got to think about HR, we've got people in different countries and all this stuff, right? But that complexity and those people breeds stuff that people think is important but really isn't. And there's the 80-20 rule is something that is just like governed a lot of how I think about business in general. And I do really think that most people's to-do lists are like 80% bullshit. And not because those things aren't useful or whatever, but like the 20% is what's going to move the needle.
Yeah.
And if you convince yourself that you need to be working on the business as it is, which actually, if you look at it, is quite an unsatisfactory result. Like, we want to grow way bigger than that. You need to be thinking about how you work on the business that could be as well.
Yeah.
And those 20% big things, those things that are really, really valuable, are things going to move the needle.
A lot of that 80% is like things you can delegate as well.
And and outsource and like maybe even don't need to happen now. Like, but that really big thing that feels difficult and challenging, whatever, that's where I want us to be spending more time. So that process of just trying to every day like rewrite it and say, is this really important, has been really valuable for me.
Yeah, interesting. So going on to like, let's kind of reflect on the last.
Just smiling.
It's a happy guy. Just I guess to kind of switch things up a little bit, it'd be great to kind of dig a bit deeper into your biggest learnings over the last 12 months.
The bit that it comes maybe back to what we were talking about, which is like one of the biggest learnings has been focus. I do really believe that, just on a pure tactical level, the future winners in consumer goods are going to be the people who understand creative the best.
Yep.
I have got to a point where, and look, I was a media buyer and I sort of enjoy as many spreadsheets as anyone else, but I do feel like the role of the media buyer is really, really changing. And what you want is people with like a lot of energy to try and work out all of the angles and then just come up with genuinely creative, like actually creative ways of communicating that. I think a lot of people do creative, but that hook, that way of being, that visual style, whatever it might be, that silliness, that real play is what can win. Like I don't think that can't be processized, but I do think that real creativity will always win.
I think it's an element of process. There's an element of process that goes into that creativity. There's an element of process that distills available information to give you the highest hit rate possible on that creativity. So customer insights, like some data from the ad account of what's already worked, what hasn't worked, distilling that down into a process and then layering the creativity on top of that.
It's about where you play
nice data-driven creativity.
Yeah, a really nice mix of the two. And that's why I think it's Rory Sutherland I was talking about to someone about. He says that he doesn't like the idea of a creative strategist because he thinks that every creative should be strategic. But I think that a creative strategist is inherently more data driven in this area. I also think a lot of creatives can go campaign to campaign with like less of a roadmapped approach of how like one batch of output may then be used to dictate the next batch of output and that kind of like long-term sort of 30, 60, 90-day process of really driving massive swings in performance.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of see both sides of it, and by the way, when I've stated this sort of thing, we are a long way from where we want to be, and there's a lot for us to learn about how the mothership makes that work. But you know, I do think that firstly, the link between media buyer, creative strategist, and creative is like very blurry, and I think you know, like, where does I 100% agree that we basically creating as much data and giving as much data, both qualitative and quantitative, to people to then come up with angles and ideas. But actually, I think a lot of that time will be like linking the media buyer and the creative strategist quite closely.
Yeah, that's what we focus on.
And I'm like, that is really the core of it, because then the creative execution is like the brief. Yeah. And like that, but it's the ideas that are linked to how it works. And sometimes you even thought that maybe they should be one and the same person.
Yeah, well, like, we train our media buyers like strategists and strategists like media buyers now.
Because also, like, what I'm saying, like, you know, my dad was in advertising in the glory days of advertising, you know, like the 70s and stuff. You know, in many ways, it's not really changed. But I would say the one thing that has changed is that the immediacy of creative, the feedback loop is so quick, and so you can be a lot more reactive. And my worry is if you create silo here, media buyer, silo here, like that can actually stop that reactivity. And so you need them to be very close.
I think you definitely do. I think there is there's a functional difference in the characteristics of the people that sit in those two roles. Like media buying, I do believe it's changing. I always think there's going to be someone doing that role, because even if just top of mind, like things that you have to think about there is like first time impression ratio, how your campaigns are overlapping, like bounce rates on certain landing pages, like very it's becoming a much more holistic position than just like,
well, I think it's also moving
the execution of the ad account. It's more like offer, creative, post click, knitting those things together.
Moving down the funnel, right? I think that's the interesting thing. Is also like what we have discovered is that we talk, you know, it's very easy to talk about just creative and top of funnel stuff of like how do you generate impressions and clicks and all that stuff, but actually what the media buyer should also be thinking about is offer, and for landing page and throughput and all that, and that's kind of
like
merchandising
unit economics as well.
Yeah, unit economics is like, this is kind of becoming more conversion rate optimization and merchandising, and it's sort of like the whole thing is kind of moving.
Kind of comes back to what you were saying earlier about where do you kind of place that creativity? Is that data driven? Is that not? And you know, that's why, and with the brands that we work with you on, you know, we're doing much more of an approach of, okay, how do we split creatives across that performance funnel, and then we've labeled creatives in terms of a big swing, which is those big wild cards where you do have more freedom to be more creative and almost taking inspiration from different markets and niches, and you know, not necessarily the data is driving those decisions other than the messaging and the angle, and then you have those more framework driven concepts as part of those splits, which are utilizing existing frameworks within the ad account, or you know, legacy best performers or competitor best performers that then drive those that strategy.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it kind of speaks to exactly that point, which is that is a creative strategy that's fundamentally based on a media buying question, which is basically like, okay, it's maybe like a tough moth kind of classic like account, right? Like different creatives are used for different things. And I mean, we talked the other day about the fact that when you were testing new products, you start with static, and then you test a product market fit, and then you move into kind of bigger things. And I think probably the same thing is like different creatives work for different strategies, and those big swings are the things that will change your ad account forever. Those big swings will be the big creatives that can go from like, suddenly your CAC goes from like 20 quid to 15, right? But if you don't have the constant baseline of, we know these ads convert, they're bottom funnel, they're either offers or they're, you know, they're strong, these are the USPs, they're strong kind of simple messages, then you're not going to be able to convert those people really
that's the
easily,
backbone for consistency.
I think that kind of that problem aware, solution aware, product aware, like that framework. You can apply that to organic as well. I think people should apply that more to an organic strategy.
Yeah,
like the way they
organic
tailor
is something that we just do not do very
it's
well.
like, I think nothing fishy is a great example of this, right? Because I think, you know, it's omega-3, and, you know, I think the benefits, if you're looking at where that sits in terms of the performance funnel, how problem aware really is the audience. And, you know, I was someone that was really into my supplements, but I actually didn't know all of the negatives associated with you know, omega-3 that isn't vegan. So, you know, there's more of an educational play there, that you have to go slightly higher in that performance funnel specifically to be able to drive people through the funnel.
I totally agree, and I think with Nothing Fishy especially, this is a great example of like maybe also how our approach has changed in the last 12 months, and well, probably also the journey we've been on, because when we bought that business, it was very focused on just omega-3, and it was vegan, and it was very like basic, but we had no kind of reason to exist in a kind of wider sense. And we went through a big branding exercise to get to a point where we really felt like we knew who it was trying to target, we knew why, and then it was much easier to educate. I think that the other thing that we slightly struggle with, or have struggled with, is trying to learn D2C, because we did just basically learn D2C from scratch. We've realized that having the brand backbone of like, okay, we know who we are, it almost creates, we talk a lot about it, it's value externally, right, how you sell, but it's also internal. Like if everyone working on the brand knows why that brand exists and what we're trying to do, it creates like a lot of solidity that then when we're working on creatives, we're like, oh yeah, we can talk about these problems in this way because it feels a lot more consistent. And so, you know, that brand is, you know, then getting to a point where you can educate and you feel like you're coming from a position of authority because you know who you are. It's a lot easier to educate and a lot easier to say, okay, those ads make sense. Let's try it then. And that's been a really big learning that's taken us a huge amount of time. I mean, Nothing Fishy, quite frankly, was declining for 18 months before January this year, and then the growth has been massive comparatively, but that's just been basically 18 months of us. It's been like the journey of us. It was the first pure D2C play we bought, and it took us 18 months to work out what the hell we were going to do. And then, you know, it's starting to work.
So obviously in terms of like moving forward, you mentioned a few pieces. You mentioned the Barcelona trip, you mentioned like this journey you've been on. What does that, like, the rest of this year and then 2025 look like for you and the Mothership?
I'm pretty excited, to be honest. Like I think one of the things we have struggled with is really understanding what we're trying to do, and obviously on a basic point, we're trying to grow businesses that we buy, but like what kind of businesses do we buy and how do we grow them, and like why are all things that we just haven't, we really struggled to get clarity on. And I think over the last 6 months, we've really gone from a position of no clarity to a lot more solid understanding of what we want to be. And so what I've worked out is a couple of things. The first thing is that as an acquirer, we have the immense privilege of taking on someone's baby and then hopefully doing it justice and growing it. But we can't do everything. And so what really we believe we're able to do is based into kind of 3 key factors that gives us defensibility, right? So like we also need to understand like why we're different, why we add value. So the first thing is you know, probably quite boring to most listeners, but like we have a really strong finance function and we have a really strong data function. Like data and finance that can actually drive insights in the business is something that a lot of brands sub 10 million, let's say, just struggle with, right? Building out that, and then also because we are focusing really on health and wellness, that also brings compliance, like an understanding of like product compliance and labeling compliance, and how we make sure that products are as compliant as possible in every market we sell in. That gives us one really strong moat. So we're focusing on that. Then we have an amazing logistics team. We have an awesome. We were really lucky. We managed to acquire a warehouse up in Edinburgh, in Livingston, just outside Edinburgh, that we thought was a massive risk, but actually it's turned out huge value add for us, because we can obviously leverage better postage rates than we basically take a 3PL's margin, but we also can own the customer journey. And having a really strong logistics function is a huge value add for us. And then the third thing is being really, really strong at performance digital, which is basically Amazon, because marketplace growth is huge, and the ability to execute on marketplaces can give you huge growth very, very quickly. But also because there's huge correlation in our experience between Facebook spend and marketplace spend and marketplace search.
1-to-1 in places.
Yeah. And so if you're able to take that, you basically got double and bottom of funnel opportunities. Meta and Google for the moment, alongside great creative to service all of those things. So if you think about those three things, that is our focus, and that sounds like a lot, but like when you've got a team of just almost 40, that is the basic structure of our business. To say, okay, we've got data, finance and compliance, we've got logistics and fulfillment, and we've got digital marketing, and that we can manage. And that sounds really simple, but it's been a massive insight for us. And that also acknowledges that what we're really good is optimization. Like, we're really good at the optimization piece. We are not as good at the story, why does this thing exist? We can take that and we can make it better and incremental, and we can grow you to new countries and new geographies and new channels and all of these things. But the benefit is we know what we're buying, and we're buying that really strong product market fit, that brand position. And so 2025 for us is really nailing that, getting to a position where we're really, really at a position where the execution on all of those three phases is at its best, which obviously is measured in profitability and performance and sales growth. We know where our real priorities are. We've literally ranked our brands by priority and clarity of like what we want to do. And we have two buckets. So we have two buckets we care about. We have grow and optimize. And grow is basically like, we want to invest in growth. We want to be putting effort into it. And optimize is not that we don't care about them, but fundamentally they're in a position of holding and basically reducing resource to flow cash to the rest of the business. So we're using those businesses to fund other businesses' growth. And then that can be seasonal. So some businesses which is a more seasonal are in optimize until they become a grow business. Or it can be like, we're going to just run this for as long as we can. And then, we'll see what happens. But that clarity of saying this is 1 to 7, this is grow and optimize, and these are the three things we're going to work on, is sort of a lot more structured. So 2025 is the execution year.
One thing I love that I've noticed from afar with Mothership is, and you spoke about this as well online, is just the self-awareness within the business, how you've really leaned into the strengths of what your team is best at. Do you call it team channel fit, was it?
Yeah, team channel fit,
talk about that briefly, because I think that's such an interesting topic that isn't really spoken about much.
I think this is playing to your strengths is like a huge part of how you work out how you're going to grow a business. And I come from a pretty performance driven background. Like, I understand pretty well the commercials, the numbers, and I think actually a lot of our senior team are quite data driven, quite that optimization really suits us. And we spend a lot of time trying to do stuff way outside of that. Brand building, PR, all of this other stuff that we just really didn't understand how to manage. And when we've decided who we are and what we're really good at, and therefore we know who we're good at hiring, and you wanted to talk about hiring, I'm sure we can come onto that in a second, but we feel more comfortable knowing, like every part of the business we feel more comfortable running if we know who we are, we know what we're good at. And so a lot of that sort of structured expression is also an expression of how I think, of how the team thinks, and therefore it just feels a lot more right to us to then understand where we need to go, and therefore understand what we can outsource or what we don't know and what we need to hire for. But it's a lot clearer because we spend a lot of time working out what we're good at and where we're finding wins. And that's probably just in a basic way shown by our Amazon performance. Like, we are really good at Amazon, we're really good at Amazon brand building and Amazon growth. We're less good at D2C, and that's probably because Amazon is much more what Google search used to be, and it's like very structured, and like we get that. And so learning that and then understanding how we approach D2C from that angle has actually yielded way better D2C results. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Makes
really
a lot of
interesting.
sense.
Really interesting. Well, we're gonna have to wrap up soon. This is annoying because we're into the flow here, and
I'll come back again.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do a part 2. But yeah, honestly, Laurence, thank you so much for coming on today. I think it's just been really, really interesting having you come in and talk a bit more about the business and the journey so far. Where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Thanks for shouting out my posts. I'm on a bit of hiatus at the moment. I need to post. I'll post today. I'm on LinkedIn, Laurence Booth-Clibborn, and I am on Twitter, although I don't tweet very much. I just lurk.
Just one of the ghosts.
I like Olly's tweets. I like Olly's tweets. That's what I do. Hit me up and DM me. My DM's open. I'm always happy to chat. Anything. I'm always happy to chat about acquisitions. If you have any questions about how you might want to sell your business or anything like that, let me know. And always happy to grab 10 minutes and talk about it.
Amazing.
Yeah, thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
thank
you so much for coming on. And yeah, obviously, if you enjoyed this episode, you can find us on Spotify and YouTube. If you're listening in Spotify, go give it a watch on YouTube.